Today's episode is brought to you by HERdacity. HERdacity is a nonprofit inspiring confidence in women to achieve their professional goals. For resources, networking opportunities, and a strong community of women, visit HERdacity.org to learn more.
Welcome to HERdacious, a podcast for audacious women. Welcome to HERdacious, the podcast for audacious career women looking to move up a little in their career games. I'm Lorelei, and I'm really glad you decided to join us today as we discuss the power of body language and how to use it effectively. Joining me in this conversation, we have communications expert and founder of the company Power Body Language, Lisa Mitchell. She's a certified forensics interviewer, jury consultant, and tech founder whose mission is to help 1 million people show up as their most confident and clued-in selves in any situation. Welcome, Lisa.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on.
I am really glad you decided to join us today. Having a body language expert is really exciting.
Yeah, I love this stuff. Any opportunity I have to share it is a good day for me.
Excellent. I'm glad you feel that way because I know that body language is the largest tool in our toolbox of communication. Share with us why it is important that we learn how to wield this tool better.
Yeah, absolutely. Body language has been a total game changer for me from how I communicate, how I understand other people. It's one of these rare tools that we all already possess, but very few people actually develop or leverage to their maximum benefit. So part of what I love to do is help people understand how body language can really inform your interactions and inform your communication and inform your influence. I teach everything kind of like a game plan. So there's like the offense side of things, which is how you can use the tool proactively. And then there's also kind of the defense side of things, or how you can decode other people or groups of people during interaction. So there's really like a double-sided benefit, and it's just really not complex and not hard. It's really accessible to anyone to learn, which is part of why I get so excited about it. I teach the same thing to third graders that I do to CEOs. It's just, how do you apply it with where you are in life right now?
I've never heard of body language framed in an offense or defensive style. That's really interesting.
I do a lot of training with athletes and law enforcement and a lot of kind of executive people, and trying to figure out how to provide it in a context that was easy to understand kind of universally is where the sports analogy, the offense defense side of things comes into play. So it seems to just help it click a little bit more easily with that context.
Well, help us better understand how being more in control and aware of our body language can help us professionally.
Yeah, it's really a super powerful tool. And part of what most people struggle with in a professional environment is they're so worried about what's happening on the other side of them, or they're so worried about the content, or talking to bullet points, or sharing credentials, or selling whatever they're there to convince someone to buy into, that they forget about the presentation side of things. They forget how is the way that they're showing up in their space impacting the outcomes that come from those interactions. And having that awareness that, yes, it is valid and it is important, and it does have a very big impact on moving you either closer to or further away from your desired outcome. And it's really something you have much more control over than people usually realize. So it's fun to help build the awareness and help people figure out what tool set, what part of body language am I most easily able to deploy that actually helps me move where I want to go.
Where do you start in that journey?
I like to start with observation. And so this is where, coaching comes in handy. Having someone else, just asking someone how they experience you can be really powerful. Like, what's memorable about me? What did you notice first? What did I do that was annoying? Right? Did I do anything that distracted from my message? Like, getting that kind of feedback or coaching can be super valuable. The other tool I love to use is recording yourself. So whether it's recording yourself while you're on the phone to say, how do you perform vocally? Like, what's your vocal power look like as far as tonality, rate of speech, filler words, all of those things that can either help or hurt you. Recording yourself on video, which most people hate to do.
Yeah.
The video is really our biggest truth teller. So if you're rehearsing a presentation, or there's part of a sales pitch that you're uncertain about, or if you're going in to negotiate a raise or something that's important to you, just role playing, and whether it's with yourself or grabbing a friend or a family member and walking through it and recording yourself can really inform in a very powerful way what areas are helping you and what areas are hurting you. So building awareness is really the first step towards getting more control over those.
I really appreciate that question that you asked initially. How do people experience you? Wow. Like, what a perspective. How do I make you feel when I show up, right? Like, that's the question.
Yeah, that's the question. Period. Like that's the most important thing. We forget so often that it's not about us. It's about the experience that people have on the other side of us. That really is a key determining factor in almost everything that we do, especially professionally.
It makes me think of it's a quote. It's like people don't remember exactly what you say, they remember how you make them feel. And I'm inferring that a lot of how we make people feel is communicated through our body language.
Exactly. When it comes to like one of the key elements around body language that I usually start introducing is this concept of first impression, because people are so familiar with the term, and we often think, well, first impressions are something we don't have any control over, or they only begin when we start talking or interacting with someone. But people are forming their first impression about you in many cases before you ever open your mouth. They're watching how you walk into a room. They're watching how you wait in the reception area or in a hallway or wherever you meet up. They watch how you walk into the building from your vehicle, right? So all of these moments where people are watching or observing your presence is informing their first impression of you. So by the time you get across from someone in a conference room or sit across from them at a coffee shop, the jury's already in on how someone initially perceives you. And so it's really this concept. And when I'm coaching clients and helping them gain awareness around first impression, it's you have to be on before you're on. Because by the time you're in the spotlight or by the time you open your mouth, it's usually too late. And when you factor in now, so many people are meeting you, and I'm using air quotes around meeting, digitally. So before you meet or before you go into an interview, they've either seen you on LinkedIn, or they've looked at your social media account on Instagram, or they followed your feed on Twitter. Like all of these elements of how you're communicating both physically and verbally are already informing first impressions. So really looking in totality and asking yourself, where might someone see me or meet me for the first time? Mm-hmm. And being very strategic about how you're showing up in those places and spaces can help your first impression.
That's kind of a game changer, thinking about having to be on before you're on.
Yeah, it's a big missed opportunity for a lot of people. They think, oh, well, you think about people waiting to interview, right? They're in the waiting area and they're hunched over their phone and they're nervously scrolling or looking through their resume for key points, or just not managing their presence. And that's not to say being fake or being a performer. It's just being aware of what am I communicating with how I'm using my space and my body positioning and my facial expressions. How am I being strategic with that to make sure that people are drawing the right conclusions about me early on in our interaction?
Excellent. Excellent thing to think through. Now, I'm going to make an assumption in this next question, okay?
Sure.
What are the general gender differences in body language style?
Yes. First of all, there usually are differences. So your assumption in that question is correct. There's a lot of little nuances around how, again, really generalizing by the stereotypical male-female categories, right? There's lots of nuances around both of those. But generally speaking, the main difference that I see, and this is something fun that I do when I'm training a mixed group at like a corporate trainer or at an event, and people have kind of claimed their territory and aren't paying, like it wasn't a strategic decision, right? They just came in and naturally took their space and filled it or claimed it as they normally would. And I freeze frame the room. And when I freeze frame, I just say, just take a look around. Who's claiming the most space? And 95% of the time, it is a male in the room, or multiple men at multiple tables that have just naturally felt comfortable claiming the maximum amount of space. Space correlates very strongly from a body language perspective and a nonverbal cue perspective to confidence. So when we see someone who claims a lot of space, we often decode that person as having a higher level of confidence. When we see someone who's very contained and very, like the example I use for a lot of times in the rooms I'm looking out at, women sit down, they take up about as much room as their shoulders are wide and arrange all of their items within about the width of their shoulders, maybe slightly larger, but they are pretty well contained in how they use their space.
Yeah, sounds about right.
And they usually keep their items all like maybe hang their jacket or their bag on their chair, right? Or everything is pretty much about the width of their body at their shoulders. Conversely, men will come in and they take like 2 or 3 times even sometimes their width of table space, right? Their coffee mug is to the far right. Their cell phone is to the far left. They have notebooks and whatever. And then they may even use an additional chair to put their jacket on or to put their bag on. And they're usually just by presence, they're slightly more open, maybe putting an arm on the back of a chair. Like there's just more territory claimed.
Yeah.
And hopefully I'm painting this picture in such a way that the audience listening to this, you can really just picture in your mind's eye what that dynamic looks like. I do a lot of coffee shop creeping. I call it, we're like, well, before when you did a lot of work in coffee shops and public spaces, I would just look around at the interactions happening around me. And you almost always saw that same dynamic. If there's a mixed gender interaction happening, at least 2/3 of the available space is claimed by the male. So there is this inherent right around claiming space sometimes that you see play out in that gender specific.
Give us another gender specific example of the physical actions of our body language that can be gendered.
Yeah, the other thing I will see is how people will use space. So there's an area of science called proxemics. It's the way our relationship with how we navigate our space, both ourselves and in relation to other people. So space and positioning, a lot of times it is very normal when you're meeting someone and going up. I mean, we don't really shake hands now, but to elbow bump or wave or acknowledge each other in that initial greeting, you know, it's not unusual for a male to come just square up. And by that, I mean, they will come directly at you, stand in front of you, shoulders, hips, and knees pointing directly towards you, right? So that's a positioning called fronting. So when you're squared up, shoulders, hips, and knees, or toes, that's considered fronting. So think about 2 people kind of standing in front of each other. And then depending on how much or how little space you have, that can be seen as intrusive, that can be seen as aggressive, that can be seen as more engaged.
Yeah.
There's not always an awareness where a male will normally come straight in to a male or a female counterpart in front by default.
A woman angles, doesn't she? She keeps it slightly open.
A woman angles, correct.
Fascinating.
Yes.
Why?
So just a slight turn. I think part of it is awareness, right? Because when you square up with someone, that can be seen as very, I don't want to say aggressive in a negative way, but it can be seen as a very like direct, almost confrontational, no escape.
My thought was like dominant positioning almost.
Correct. Right. So and I think that there's many times it's very well intentioned. I am giving you my direct attention. I am engaged. I am ready to greet you, to interact with you. It's a sign of almost acknowledgement or respect in many cultures to square up like that.
Yeah.
And men, I think you think about how men are socialized even from the time of being young children, like you square up on the line or you know, football lines, or you square up with your opponent for tip off, right? A lot of the stereotypical kind of interactions that men and boys are socialized with is there's some sort of square up, right? To start whatever you're going to do. So that kind of carries over into the business environment, whereas women more often will wait to be invited, right? Or will wait to feel safe or wait to feel comfortable before they go into a more targeted engagement pose. So they stay open. Sometimes it's an intrinsic, I don't know if I feel safe, or I don't know if I want to engage. Sometimes it can be out of deferment to the other person's comfort level.
Fascinating. Well, to be aware of my space in this show, we're going to take a quick moment for a sponsor break.
Hi,
Barbie here from Moonray, husband and wife indie pop duo. If you enjoy the intro music, we invite you to listen to our debut EP, Honeymoon, streaming now on all platforms. Visit www.moonray-music.com for more.
And we're back with Lisa Mitchell talking about body language. Lisa, how does understanding our body language help women feel more confident and, dare I say, influential?
Yeah, absolutely. Both of those words are very valid. And understanding body language specifically from the female perspective is really about giving an added element of control to an interaction. When you think about what creates uncertainty, what can help you appear small or less confident or meek, it's usually when you aren't certain, when you're missing data points, or you're still kind of figuring out the landscape of something. All of that can be just collecting information. But again, with perception being reality, someone watching you in this process may perceive you as lower power, lower confidence, or maybe not possessing the degree of certainty that they would hope that you would have. So being able to, in real time, throughout the course of an interaction, collect all of these data points from someone else about how they're experiencing you gives you the control to know what's working well, to know what maybe isn't landing the way you thought it would, to maybe see when they aren't understanding something, or you can provide additional information or offer additional help or support to help someone get where you need them to go in your conversation or interaction. All of that is super powerful. It's the difference between driving somewhere you've never been without a GPS versus having a GPS to help guide you with certainty the direction you want to go. So understanding both what you're seeing and how you can then react to what you're seeing to help bring people to the outcome that you'd like them to get to is really just a way to increase your social intelligence and also create the outcomes that you're wanting to drive for. So it's really just more control, more certainty, knowing how to navigate the landscape, and not guessing.
Well, I feel like that leads us directly into you sharing some examples of good and bad body language, specifically in a professional setting.
Yeah, there's a lot. I'm lucky to work with some really amazing clients. And one of the biggest examples I can think of, because there were just so many people involved, is I was at a startup competition. People were presenting their companies with hopes of either getting investors or winning an award to get some funding. And this particular setup was like a rapid fire. You had like 90 seconds to do a really quick pitch on your business.
Whoa.
They had almost 100 companies lined up for this rapid fire pitch. But what was interesting is you had the stage. It was in a big, beautiful facility. You had the stage and the spotlight, and the audience was about 1,000 deep, directly out from the stage. But where they were holding the people who were coming up to pitch next was right along the side of the room. So they weren't behind a curtain. They weren't backstage. They were clearly visible to everyone in the audience, right? Which was investors and strategic partners and people they were really hoping to impress. And so many of those people who were about to go pitch let their guard down, lost the awareness that they could be seen, and really ruined their opportunity to make the competent, confident first impression they were hoping to make by not managing themselves on the side of the room. So you would see people flipping frantically through note cards. You would see people screwing around on their phones, not paying any attention. You'd see people joking around, acting like elementary school kids, you know.
Geez.
And all the investors, all the audience could see this.
Yeah.
They weren't invisible. And then they would get up on stage and they would turn it on and do a 90-second pitch. And you're like, well, what? Like, who are you? Right? I've seen you standing on the side of the room, just not having any awareness, being silly, being distracted, not looking serious, not looking professional. And then you walk up on stage and you're all professional and put together and giving this amazing pitch. But what I've seen now doesn't make sense to me because I already saw you one way.
Right. There's a dissonance there.
Right. And one of the easiest ways you can lose someone's confidence in you is to create confusion for them. So to either do something they don't expect you to do or to show them two incongruent versions of yourself.
Yeah.
people get stuck there. And then it erodes trust, because then they don't know if they can trust you to be consistent, or they don't know if they can trust their own perception of you, because you have created an opportunity for confusion.
We're all going to be at a hypothetical boardroom situation where we got a couple of people around the table, mixed crowd. Give us a couple of visual cues that people are sending that are either positive or negative in regard to their body language.
People have a general lack of awareness that people are watching them, right? Especially in that scenario where maybe you're coming in and you're wrapping up a phone call or you're checking your email. Like our devices are the quickest way to erode people's positive first impression of us.
Ooh.
Because they present a distraction. And what people want when they are in the same space with you is to know that you are engaged and that you are work ready, right? People's time is very valuable. The example, especially when you're going in for an interview or a performance review or a board meeting or an investor meeting, people want to know from the moment they see you that they have your attention and that you are ready to work. So coming in, giving attention to your phone or elsewhere, or being just self-focused and distracted and not being intentional about making eye contact and greeting them. I like to verbalize my intention. It's so nice to be here. I'm looking forward to a really productive discussion with you. So you're complementing your nonverbals with your verbal intention. You have a really great opportunity in an environment like that to easily manage someone's impression of you and to get them excited to work with you, because there's no better feeling. If I walk into a meeting and everyone's on their phone or everyone's distracted or I don't get eye contact, I assume you're not serious and you're not ready to do work with me yet. And I started just saying, I don't want to interrupt, is what I like to open with. I don't want to interrupt. It looks like you're being really thoughtful about something that you're working on right now. So just let me know when you're ready to start. And they get it, right? Like it's really I won't say a backwards compliment, but it really is kind of a backwards way of calling someone out that doesn't seem aggressive, but gets the point across. Because I won't start a training if I'm doing a group training. I won't start a keynote until I have everyone's attention.
Yeah, of course. Give us a few other very targeted examples. I'm thinking like the signaling of teeth or where we put our hands, how we use our arms.
Yeah. Hands are a big one. So for me, like in the interview or interrogation space, right, hands are another confidence indicator. So when someone is wanting to appear trustworthy, they're wanting to appear ready or warm or friendly, keeping hands visible or a hand visible, especially like the example I'll give you is when you're talking about a key part, or whether it's a deliverable or a cost or a contract term, having your hands or a hand visible to the person across from you at the table or even over video, keeping your hands active and in play helps their brain feel more certain about you, to feel safer with you and to increase trust with you. So you'll see a lot of times, politicians or people that are trying to convince you of something, right? They want you to believe that they're honest. They'll do the open hand gesture. Either one hand will be open palm. And that's really the nonverbal equivalent of I'm not holding anything back, right? Like I'm disclosing, I'm being honest. I'm not hiding anything. Because what do you do when you hide stuff? Like you put your hands behind your back, right? Or they become less visible. So we've been conditioned, even at a subconscious level, that hands equals trust to some degree. So when I do, when I'm coaching my attorney teams or my defendants getting ready to go into a jury trial, we are very, very cognizant about visibility of hands, use of hands, presentation of disclosure. All of these things that we know are helping people's brains believe us. That's really what we want to do, is create that trust.
Give us an example of your most commonly seen unintentional body language signal.
Oh, this is a good one. So I think for me, it's the one I observe the most, the one I have had to work personally the hardest to overcome as a default negative nonverbal indicator is crossing my arms.
Oh, okay.
So a lot of people will, like for me, especially if I'm in like a group event or networking, or I'm with people that I don't know, my default when I'm speaking to someone is to cross my arms or to keep one arm kind of across my torso area, which is by default like a protective gesture. Crossed arms can be seen as defensive or creating distance or separation. It can also be seen as a protective measure or one that could cue as uncertainty. So when we feel unsafe or uncertain, a lot of times we want to cover our torso, because that's where all of our most sensitive vital organs are. So just from an instinctual level, we cover that. If we feel unsafe, we'll cover that. So trying to stay open, whether it's hands down by your side or loosely, one kind of tucked in a pocket or on your hip, like any of those that create expansion, not contraction, can counteract that. But crossed arms is one I see a lot. People that have a background in particularly in military or law enforcement, which is a sector that I work with quite a bit, those gentlemen like to stand with their hands behind their back, oftentimes as a sign of respect or kind of a default ready position. But if you can't see their hands, trust gets eroded. So helping to open them up or bring the hands back to the front of the body is something that we spend time working on. So really the hands and the arms, as far as how you use them to block or distance, that's the most unintentional negative nonverbal cue that I see a lot of times.
Feels kind of like lizard brain sort of protection that's completely not thought through, right? Your body just naturally does it.
Right. And if you're not aware of it and you can't pause and kind of challenge yourself on why am I presenting myself this way, then you can unintentionally cue to the negative. So it's really having that awareness of how somebody, again, it comes back to how is someone perceiving me? My intention is I'm cold or I'm just comfortable. But if someone is perceiving me differently, then that's something I want to be responsible for kind of helping them draw the right conclusion about me.
Excellent. Now, in this world that we are living in right now, a lot of us are communicating virtually, like you and I are doing today. What do we need to be aware of in regards to our body language on these video chats?
For a lot of people, it's just having the awareness that I need to show up on screen over a video or a device the same way I do if we're sitting across the table from each other. So bringing the expression I use is you need to bring the fullness of yourself to the video interaction. So gesturing, facial expressions, how you position your body, all of that, it needs to really be almost like you're sitting across from somebody in a physical space. A lot of people will play small or they don't manage anything. Like they go really, they just go really low from an energetic standpoint because they think it doesn't matter, but you actually have to be more conscious and more intentional from an energetic presence standpoint to create that warmth and that trust and that likability over video.
As you work with folks through your practice, how have you seen people's awareness of their body language change over time and what that delivers to them?
That's a great question. I think one of the things that's most rewarding for me from a coaching perspective with these skills is people are usually overcomplicating the concept from the beginning. They know there's a science, they know there's, 17 statistical cues of deception, and there's the science of first impressions, and there's all of these like really kind of unapproachable ways that body language is framed. But when you start looking at one skill at a time, like let's focus on your facial expressions and understanding what's showing up on your face when, what's showing up on people across from you, what that means to you, or let's focus on eye contact, right? There's a scientific ideal, but let's see what feels really comfortable for you. And let's see what helps other people feel like you're really engaged, but it's still comfortable to them. So focusing on just one skill at a time on the whole body language spectrum makes it really approachable. And people are really surprised, pleasantly so, at how quickly their awareness grows and they begin to really execute it just naturally. I call it automation. So seeing that progression and that comfort level and that automation kick in is super fun. That's my favorite part when it like clicks and they're like, I used it here, or I saw somebody do this to me and I knew what it meant. It's like, yeah.
Oh, I love that. Excellent. Well, lastly, I want to ask you for some resources for our listeners.
If you're interested in connecting with me further, I love to get questions and jump on a call and see how I can help you. I share a lot of tips and tricks on body language and communication skills in general on social media. So if you want to follow me on Instagram or on TikTok, it's at Lisa Mitchell Indy. And that'll be in the show notes as well. And then if you really want to hone in on mastering your body language and learning how to read other people during video calls, I do have a free resource as well that will be linked up. That's just a really great, easy guide of key things to look for to how to decode body language during video calls. And then another great resource is by a friend and mentor of mine, Vanessa Van Edwards at The Science of People. And it's just scienceofpeople.com. That's their handle on all the social media, Science of People. Tons of video, tons of resources, lots of ways to figure out how you're showing up in the space, and a list of resources as well for other books and videos and things like that. So I'm always happy to be a reference and send you in the right direction, because my dream is that everyone would know, understand, and love this as much as I do.
Well, thank you, Lisa. Now, to wrap up our show, we're going to transition to our Femme fact. With the uncertainty that COVID is creating just generally, we are seeing a lot of uncertainty specifically impact the film industry, especially on our most anticipated summer flicks. They're halting production. We're not going to get all the shows and the movies that we thought we were going to get. And Disney fans are also experiencing this roller coaster of emotions. Thank you, COVID. So, from the controversial theme park opening in Florida to the heavenly blessing that is Hamilton being available for streaming on Disney Plus, fans have a lot to endure right now, including the postponing of the film remake of Disney's classic warrior princess, Mulan. Mulan has been highly anticipated by Disney fans and non Disney fans alike, because the badass tale of a female warrior saving all of China is one that is difficult to not be impressed by. And to be clear, this is not a Disney story. In fact, it follows ancient Chinese folklore based on a female warrior named Hua Mulan. Hua Mulan was a Chinese warrior who was thought to have lived and fought during the Northern and Southern dynasties, circa 420-ish to maybe 589 Common Era. Today, her story is told through the famous Ballad of Mulan. In said ballad, Hua Mulan disguised as a man to take her elderly father's place in the army. She fought in the army for 12 years, garnering high renown, but eventually refused all rewards offered to her and later retired to her peaceful hometown to live out the rest of her life. Now, the tale of Mulan is hotly debated as to whether she actually existed in real life, but most of the population tends to believe her existence resides within fiction. Nevertheless, her story was obviously impactful enough that it inspired several movie adaptations of her journey. Aside from the widely known Disney animated adaptation, there was a wartime film called Hua Mulan, which is available on YouTube with English subtitles for those of you curious about a non-Disneyfied version of the tale, as well as many other movies, plays, TV shows, and novels. Additionally, there happens to be a crater on the planet Venus named the Hua Mulan. Her impact is truly out of this world. On a more serious note, let's face it, the Western world is mostly familiar with this heroic tale because of the Disney cartoon that many of us grew up with. However, we should be aware that this tale has Chinese origins and is highly respected amongst those in China. Disney's animated films tend to take on their own spin on some of these classic tales, and Mulan was no exception. The Chinese in general took grave offense with the cultural misrepresentations spotted throughout the animated movie. For example, the movie conflates Chinese and Japanese imagery throughout. They confused the Chinese tradition of family clan with that of Native Americans. They had the emperor bow to Mulan at the end of the movie, which is unfathomable. The romance between General Li and Mulan was definitely not a thing in the original tale either, and a couple of folks took umbrage with the Mushu character and his obnoxious behavior, which, yeah, I get it. In remaking the live-action version of this cartoon that was set to release this summer, Disney was more receptive to Chinese feedback regarding the story and the retelling of this tale in a way that omits much of the unreasonable parts and prioritizes Mulan's bravery, particularly by dropping this romance. So, huzzah! Despite the potential upset that some hardcore Disney fans might have in regard to this change, I think we can all understand the value of properly representing other cultures and being advocates for accurate representation within the media that we consume. As many of us have been finding ways to be warriors in our own right throughout our lives, This is another tiny step forward in a positive direction. Cultural representation matters. Always. As we continue to consume movies and media at a rapid clip, it's important that we showcase other cultures appropriately and respectfully, and maybe even learn something about our histories and others along the way. Lisa, it has been a joy to share this time with you, and I really appreciate you giving your expertise and your time to our community today.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here.
It was my pleasure. This was HERdacious. I'm Lorelei, and I'm really glad you chose to join us today. If you liked our show, please subscribe and share it with a friend who might need to hear the information that has been shared here today. Tune in next week.